Good afternoon, Senators and Representatives, and thank you for this opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Ed Stanak, and I'm a resident of Bear City. Please bear with me, my son is a little mess today as I try to simultaneously speak and breathe at the same time. I am a state employee retiree and a beneficiary of the Vermont State Employees Retirement System. I am here today to state a position in favor of the gradual divestment of the state employee retirement fund from fossil fuel industries because continued investments are a threat to the long-term financial security of the fund. By way of background, I was employed in the state of Vermont for 32 years as an administrator of the Land Use and Development Law known as Act 250. In that capacity, I read reams of studies on a host of environmental issues, including those on climate change, which began in the mid-1980s. During my state career, I was also very active in the Vermont State Employees Association, serving as the president of the association for 6 years between 2000 and 2006. I was also the chair of the Non-Management Unit Bargaining Team. I am a current member of the VSCA Council, and I serve as a trustee on the Retirees Chapter. Having said all that, my comments today are not on behalf of the SCA, but they are very much grounded in my deep solidarity with my union brothers and sisters. I think we're all very familiar with the overwhelming scientific studies that have been done documenting the projected adverse effects of climate change. I'm here today to address the growing economic analyses that have been done regarding the carbon bubble and stranded assets. And that's the threat to the retirement fund. As that bubble grows larger and larger, even that Radical magazine, which I think Bernie Sanders reads, Forbes magazine, in January of last year declared that the carbon bubble is real and it is expanding. It's just a matter of time when it bursts. I'm not going to reiterate the testimony which at least I believe the Senate committee has already heard from Eric Becker and others, economists who have done financial analysis. But I will note one study which is referenced in the second attachment which I gave the committees, which was my submittal to VPIC. And the study I'm going to refer to is one that was done by the Union of Concerned Scientists, I believe it was 2 years ago, entitled Stormy Seas and Rising Risks. And what they did in that report was they looked at the majority of refineries in the United States. The way it happened, of course, of history, is that about 90% of the refineries are located on the three coasts, the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Gulf Coast. And what they did was they looked at the impacts of those refineries from Katrina and Sandy. What happened after the tide came in, literally. And what they did was they found hundreds of millions of dollars of damage took place on the Gulf Coast and on the Atlantic Coast. My favorite one is the poster child of stranded assets. It's a refinery known as the Bayway Refinery. I think anyone that's driven down the New Jersey Turnpike and you get south of Newark Airport and you drive through that industrial lunar landscape, that huge refinery on both sides of the turnpike is the Bayway Refinery, which is owned by the Phillips 66 Corporation. That took a massive hit when Sandy came in. Subsequent to that, they did a study to try and determine what kind of levees, what kind of dikes would they have to construct in order to withstand what they acknowledge as the rising tide for climate change. And it really can't be done. But I suggest you look at the study from the Union of Concerned Scientists, particularly the appendix therein, because they make recommendations to other entities such as the Security Exchange Commission on the federal level, pointing out that in the current federal statute and rules, it's very weak, the disclosures that the fossil fuel industries have to make in terms of the potential for stranded assets. That should be certainly tightened up. Over the last 2 to 3 years, I have pursued many efforts for fact-finding on the effects of the carbon bubble on the Vermont State Employee Retirement Fund. I pursued all the internal processes within the SCA in an attempt to have a study committee formed to answer the question, what is going to be the cost to the fund from continued investments in the fossil fuels long-term? What's going to happen when the stranded assets begin to occur? I was not successful in convincing the union to form a study committee. I also participated in proceedings before VPIC as documented again in the submittal which I gave to the committee. I went and attended the July 2015 VPIC meeting and urged them not to take a position on divestment, rather in favor of updating their ESG policy, which is outdated. That policy, dealing with social and environmental governance, has nothing in it specific to carbon and these stranded assets, which I am addressing. As I said, I failed in that also, because VPIC went ahead and voted unanimously to oppose divestment. Now, I mention these efforts because I firmly believe that there's an obligation of the citizen to exhaust all possible options and solutions before trying to seek a legislative remedy. So I did my homework. And so I'm here today on the horns of a dilemma in now seeking a legislative remedy. And that dilemma is, I'm sure you've heard, the concern about precedent from having a role of the General Assembly in guiding the investment decisions by the administrator of the fund. Way back in the 1980s when I had more hair on my head and I joined with other then young activists, the issue at the time was apartheid. And we sought legislative enactment at that time. And older, wiser union activists convinced us why that would not be a good idea. I thought the legislature in that case came up with a good answer, which was Act 246 of 1986. And in that act, the legislature applied across the board a prohibition on any public funds being invested in apartheid. I would favor that type of approach if possible. And also, relative to the specific subject matter before the committees now, I suggest also taking a look at the Prudent Investor Rule, which is found in Title 14A of the Vermont Statute, Section 902. That could benefit from an update to have some provisions in it, in addition to the existing criteria, to add criteria which deal with carbon and climate change impacts. I and many others believe that the threat, the economic effects of carbon bubble is as real as were the actual effects of the housing bubble that burst in 2008. While the environmental factors regarding climate change are compelling and urgent on their own, I anchor my view here today on divestment firmly in protecting and preventing the material and perhaps irreparable damage to the Vermont State Employee Retirement Fund by not divesting. And so in conclusion, it's an ethical imperative that brings me to the conclusion that divestment is critically essential to ensure the long-term financial security of the retirement fund, and having exhausted all other options, that leads me to petition the legislature to act to prevent foreseeable damage to the collective well-being of thousands of beneficiaries in the State Employee Retirement Fund, and I might add, tens of thousands of other Vermonters who have money invested in the Teacher Retirement Fund and Municipal Workers Fund. Thank you for listening.
You mentioned that even your own union sent us a letter stating that they do not wish to divest. And then you mentioned 1980. But my information is in 1980, we were at 115 to 125% of what we needed of our obligation. The information I receive right now is that we're somewhere between 60 and 80% funded. And taking more risk now is different than what the risk we took in 1980. Plus the fact that right now we are only the guardians of the municipal. We have no state funds in the municipal, but yet you're asking us to take a risk with funds that we are only guardians of. And if we do that and we make a mistake, would we not then be responsible to fund that fund?
Well, with all respect, my fear is that the risk is by doing nothing in the face of carbon bubble and what's being discussed in terms of the stranded assets. You know, the State Employee Retirement Fund was funded at 101% of what the actuary said was necessary in 2007. Then that bubble burst and it dropped down to 78%. It might be back up to 80%, but I think it's closer to 78% now. So I think we learned from history, and I think there is an obligation to address in a proactive way the potential of these stranded assets on the fund by gradual divestment. I'm certainly not calling for immediate divestment. I think coal is the beginning. Anyone that's reading Wall Street Journal, New York Times, these coal corporations in America are going bankrupt. It seems one every week. It's not going to recover. Some do claim it's a correction in the market that's taking place. I think that's false hope.
Other questions?
Thank you.
So I just want to remind us that we have an original bill, which some of you have seen, probably most of you. We then have a suggested strike-all that Senator Polina has worked with our legislative council around that is limiting the divestiture here to ExxonMobil and publicly traded companies that generate 50% or more of its revenue from the mining of thermal coal. So it isn't the original bill that was the 200, I just wanted everybody to be clear that there are kind of two things here, and that after a lot of testimony, we kind of come to this as a possible solution. The other thing that this does is it does add a ninth point, whatever they are, to the Prudent Investor Act, and it says whether the investment or asset is consistent with the state comprehensive energy plan adopted in da-da-da-da. I don't know if we have anybody who's going to testify about that, but my understanding is that if we put that in the prudent investor language, that it would in fact affect all investors, because this isn't just state investors. So if Representative Swaney sets up a trust fund for her grandchildren, I know you're going to do that. She has no grandchildren. That's why I used her. So she sets up a fund for her grandchildren. The financial investors that were responsible for that would have to make sure that all their investments were consistent with the state comprehensive energy plan. So whether we do something like that, I'm not sure that that's the place it should live. I just wanted to
ask a quick question for you. You had mentioned whether that there was a possibility of the VSCA study committee of some sort. So I'm just wondering, has there been any real internal conversation about the risks and sort of to study how fossil fuel-free funds are doing versus standard funds and whatnot? Have there been VSCA members who have taken the time to do that?
No, there's been no substantive discussion by the Board of Trustees or the VSCA Council. All the discussion is focused on worry about the precedent. But as far as the details and the substance, there's been nothing. And there certainly has not been any study which has drilled down into dollars and cents specific to continued investments.